it's important to buy only those products made with pasteurized milk.
Oh, I was going to say that.
Why pasteurized? Because unpasteurized or raw milk from cows, sheep, goats, or other animals can carry bacteria that can make you sick.
What is your first gut response?
So it's not just milk that could be contaminated.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Masters of Sport podcast. And we are here today with special guest, Mark Lopez, VMD. And we're going to dive deep into some of the best, I guess it would be best topic around a recovery drink. So Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Dane. Good to have you here at the farm again.
Yeah, it's great. It's been a while since I've been here. I want to go into your background, and before we dive deep into sort of spilling the beans on what we're going to be talking about, I want to know what you did and how you got into being a vet, and then essentially leading into what you did with factory farming or what would be called factory farming and sort of like your prior life, prior existence.
Yeah. Well, after high school, I took off about 12 years between high school and college. I was trying to be a rock star.
That's actually true too, right?
Well, yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah. And that clearly wasn't going to happen. And so I went through this life, reevaluation, and it was on my way up here with a friend of mine, Jonathan Fisher. And I said, I don't know what's going on with my life. I'm going to be 29 soon. And he said, well, just think about a job where even on its worst day, you come home and you're still glad to be doing what you're doing. He said, think about that. And if you can think of what that is, do it. Whatever it takes, just do that thing. And see, this is my grandfather's farm, and then it was my uncle's farm. And I remember as a kid, cow having trouble, the veterinarian coming out, pulling a calf out. And I thought cow veterinarian.
Yeah.
I could handle that. Not knowing anything about what it really was like. He was just the hero that showed up and solved the problem. And so I said, okay, I'll be a cow vet, a dairy cow vet.
So that's what you did.
Yeah. So I went to college and went to vet school and majored in food animal production and then I got out and I got a job. My first job that I accepted was in Texas.
Okay.
And
at this point, you were at Penn.
Yes.
Graduated from Penn, which is in Philadelphia.
Yes.
And then you're moving to Texas.
Yeah, I lived in Philadelphia for 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a different city by the time I left, know.
Right.
And I was in for different, all right. When I got to Texas, it was it was a different world. I was out in Stephenville in Erath County, Texas.
Okay.
Big dairy county. I mean, it's just dairies. There's 2,000 cows, dairies. There are big dairies out there. And I worked out there as a dairy cow veterinarian doing surgeries. And
so, yeah, what would that entail? If you're working specifically with commercial dairies, large, like 2,000 heads, what kind of problems do they see, and were you working at one dairy or were you working at multiple different dairies? What kind of issues would you see on a regular basis?
Dairy cow veterinarians get called out to the farm most frequently to do a pregnancy exam.
Okay.
Do preg check.
Okay.
They also get called out to do things like a DA surgery, displaced abomasum surgery. Very, very common surgery. You do it as a field surgery mostly.
So you're actually operating on a cow out in the middle of a pasture?
In a barn, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
But yeah. You can haul them in.
And you'd be surrounded by thousands of other cows, or is that separated from where you're at?
You can do it surrounded by animals and all kinds of things going on. What I found when you're doing abdominal surgery, like field surgery, all right, it's really, really helpful to be fast.
Okay.
Get in, get out, because time is equal to trauma in the barnyard. Okay. And so if you can know exactly where to cut and where to go in there and just fix this thing real quick and sew it up, the cows do a lot better. A lot better. I mean.
So would you spend time on one specific farm, or would you fly around? Like how would that be laid out?
Big dairies, and then I graduated up to I started my own business up in the Panhandle, and dairy herds weren't just 2,000 cows. There were 4,000 cows, 7,000 cows,
shit.
12,000 cows.
12,000 cows.
Mm-hmm.
So 12,000 people to me is a substantial, if I was going to a football game or something, 12,000 people is a lot.
Yeah.
12,000 cows would
Yeah.
be, and every cow approximately weighs 1,000 to 1,500 pounds. So we're looking at
A lot of biomass.
18,000 pounds or more of just cattle walking around.
Yeah, big dairies.
And how is that in a specific, like in a tight location, or because I've driven through parts of Oklahoma or parts of Texas and Kansas especially, where there's more like classic factory farms where you're like, you see cows almost stacked up on one another. Is that the style, or is it more open because it is in Texas?
What you probably see, what you're describing, probably was a feedlot.
Okay.
A beef feedlot.
Okay.
That's what people like see when you're driving down the highway and you
like
see
70.
like acres and acres and acres of cattle. That's a beef. Probably it's a beef feedlot.
Okay.
All right, and that's a whole different. Literally, I mean, it's a whole different animal. It's the same species, but they're just so different. The style of husbandry is different. The task is different. Their job is a whole different thing than dairy cows.
Okay.
You probably, if you're driving down a road, you probably aren't seeing a whole bunch of dairy cows.
Okay.
That's just not the way it works out. Dairy cows are housed differently. They can be outside and pastured like mine, even the big herds, but that's not what you're going to be seeing. I would go to a farm, like say a 7,000 cow dairy farm, and just work on that farm for the day.
Okay.
And get it all done. Do preg check on, 200, 300, 400 cows. Do some surgeries.
200, 300, 400.
Yeah. The most I ever preg checked in one day was 730.
Holy shit.
That hurt.
Yeah. So this, I want to sort of fast forward, because the whole reason that we're here is now, fast forward 20, 25 years,
Mm-hmm.
now we're in Pennsylvania. You're in Pennsylvania. You
Mm-hmm.
have a raw milk dairy certified by the state of Pennsylvania, and you provide what I believe to be probably the best recovery drink for strength and conditioning, for sports performance, and for overall health for anyone who's into general fitness. So maybe take us through the spark that led you to here, where you're at now, and that vision that you had, and then what raw milk is.
Okay. Well, when I went into dairy, when I first got my first job, I thought that I was going to, being young and all, I thought that I was going to transform,
The world.
Yeah, I was going to bring change to the world, and I quickly saw that I wasn't going to. In fact, I started to get frustrated. I started to see that I was just perpetuating the problem. I was being a part of the problem by perpetuating it. And so I wasn't going to change the dairy industry. It was going to change me if I stuck in it. And I got tired of Texas too. So my wife and I decided to, we're not going to live here. We're not going to raise kids here. Let's go home.
Right.
I walked away from a pretty good business, and we moved back here, and I didn't have a plan. I moved back to my uncle's farm. It was my grandfather's farm. There was nothing here. There was no cows. The buildings were falling apart.
I did meet your uncle, like the first, I think 2008, 2009. I remember meeting him early on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was that like part of the transition time of you taking over? Or?
Yeah. He said, just come on back, do something with the farm. I'm not doing anything with it.
Okay.
And so what I decided to do is I'm going to pasture some Ayrshire cows, and maybe I'll make cheese or do something like that. No real plan.
What made you choose Ayrshires specifically?
They
Draw out what does an Ayrshire look like?
Ayrshire is a smaller cow. They're from the Scottish town of Ayr. That's where the breed was developed,
Okay.
AYR.
Okay.
So they're like cool weather cow. They graze really well, good cheese yield, good temperament, I think. They're nice cows. They're cute.
Right.
You know? They're better looking than jerseys. Oh, he went there.
Yeah. So Jersey cows would be a whole nother breed of cows that I feel like are I think are sort of known as like in the foodie world, like the Mercedes-Benz of like nice breeds of cow that have high fat. I feel like people that are into grass-fed stuff, they love Jersey cows.
Yeah.
I remember, and the only reason I know a little bit about this is my brother has jerseys, and I still remember getting into an argument that your milk tastes better than any milk that he had. That because he doesn't milk, but other cows that in his area that have Jersey cows, and he'd be like, "There's no way it's better. Jersey's got way more milk fat, blah blah blah." And then the first time he had your milk, he's like, "Dude, this Ayrshire, I think you might be right about the Ayrshires." But to me too, like the Ayrshires would be like if you're driving through Pennsylvania or wherever, you see a Holstein, which is a classic commercial cow. They're making the tons and tons of milk. The brown spotted cows would be in Ayrshire. They're making growing up, you're like, oh, that's where you can get your chocolate milk from.
Right.
So that
brown
would be
cow,
like
chocolate milk.
Yeah, to try and paint that picture for people. That's what an Ayrshire would look like.
Yeah, they can be white. They're pretty outbred. They have a good variety of look. They can be all white.
Right.
They can be solid brown. They can be big patches of brown and white. They can be mottled brown and white. So like this deckled kind of look.
Right.
So
right.
they can look a lot of different ways. Holsteins all kind of look like Holsteins. Jerseys all look like jerseys.
Right.
The brown Swiss look like brown Swiss, and same thing with the Shorthorns, really. And the Guernseys all look like Guernseys, but Ayrshires,
they have a little bit different look. Yeah.
They celebrate diversity.
That's great. It's something that we celebrate here at Masters of Sport podcast. Okay, so you come back, you get into, you're starting to make some cheeses. What sparks that interest in raw milk, and what sparks that leading into it? And tell us what raw milk actually is, and where it comes from, how it happens, how it occurs, and what makes it raw.
Well, okay, I thought I'd milk cows and make cheese, and I didn't have a business plan. Bad idea. Do not start any business without a business plan.
I disagree. Start as many businesses as possible with as little of a plan, and then figure it out 10 years later.
Yeah, that's kind of what I did, actually, and it worked. So maybe you're right. Anyway, so I started selling raw milk and hoping people would just drive down the road. And a couple people did. You were one of them, actually.
You were one of those idiots.
I was the idiot. And it really didn't sell well until I started selling in stores, wholesaling it to stores like Kimberton Whole Foods around here. They're great.
Right.
The cheese thing didn't work out because so many good cheesemakers around here. Sue Miller down at Birch Run, she makes the best cheese that you can eat, and I can't compete with people like that.
Right.
And so I decided I was just going to go in for yogurt and kefir and raw milk.
Okay.
So
what's kefir?
Kefir is fermented. It's basically drinkable yogurt.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
one of the oldest processing milk processes you can do. It's found
Caucasus Mountains.
Yeah, like 600 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, maybe even a little bit longer.
Maybe even longer.
Because I think that there's even evidence that Genghis Khan's military was drinking mare's kefir when they were sort of conquering all the way into Europe, is like how that all basically started.
They were pretty badass, weren't they?
Yeah. So
and now their DNA is all over the world.
It's in you and I probably to some extent.
Something to think about.
So what exactly, you have your cows out on pasture.
Yeah.
They're eating grass, clover, right? They're consuming this, and then they're creating it. And you always described it as a tissue, as a living tissue.
Yes.
Walk us through that process, the biology of what's going on, and then how that turns into a milk product, and then what makes raw milk so powerful, what makes it, even to the point of what it does for a cow when a heifer is born. What does that do for that heifer health-wise?
There's a lot in that question, Dane.
It might take us 3 hours.
You might. Well, let's see if we can get it done quickly. You can't talk about milk, just milk in general, without acknowledging that it comes from the soil. So it starts with the soil and the funguses in the soil and the microbial life in the soil, providing nutrients to the grasses, and the nutrients go into the grasses and the weeds and anything the cow finds edible out there, they eat it. Now it goes into the cow's rumen, and it gets fermented in the rumen.
What's rumen?
The rumen is a fermentation vat.
Okay.
It's the big chamber of the stomach of a cow. And
how many stomachs does a cow have?
Well, it's got one digestive tract with 4 big pockets.
Okay.
Okay. So the rumen is the biggest pocket, where it's just a big vat made of rumen muscle. Okay, and it churns and it ferments, and in there you have the accumulation of the fats from the plants, the CLAs, and the CLAs spill out into the cow's blood and into her milk and into her meat and into her fat, and she absorbs these volatile fatty acids like acetic acid and propionic acid, butyric acid, through the wall of the rumen, and that's what powers the cow. Then, so that's the energy that goes into the milk. The acetic acid drives milk volume, and the propionic acid drives the milk fat. So if I got that wrong, I'm sorry. Anyway, the fermentation process actually makes the milk, makes the ingredients of the milk that get thrown together in the udder. Okay, so inside of the udder, you have a lot of blood flow, and you have these cells that are arranged in a bunch of tiny cul-de-sacs, much like a lung. You picture alveoli in a lung, but it's milk-producing cells. Mm-hmm. And so the milk gets turned into, it's basically a lot of water, about 80% water. You might have about 5% sugars. That's lactose. Okay, you might have, depending on the lactation cycle and what she's eating, you might have about 3.7 to 4 or more % milk. All right, and that's I said fat, milk fat. And then the protein is about 3.1% protein. Protein is really important to whoever eats the milk, whether it's a human or a calf, all right? Because these proteins, these whey proteins, there's the casein protein, that's what we make cheese out of, all right? But the whey protein is really important. You want whey protein in your body, all right? Because these whey proteins come out, and you got like your alpha lactalbumin and your beta lactoglobulin. These guys are, when they're intact, they help you to absorb nutrients like iron. They're basically, they act like almost like hormones in your body, turning on the right switches in your body. All right, they have bactericidal activity. Okay, these whey proteins are more than nutrients. They're more than the amino acids that you digest them into. They are biologically active, and you want them working in your body. They are your friends, okay? So that's really important too. You think of milk protein as being casein. Well, it is, but there's also the whey proteins. Super important to the calf and to you,
right.
Okay? So in there, the udder kind of assembles all of them all together, and there's also micronutrients, the minerals and the such, and you have ultimately a very nutritious, highly nutritious, dense, packed meal that the calf...
So that would also have phosphorus, zinc...
Absolutely. The micronutrients.
Calcium.
Absolutely.
Vitamin D to a point, also vitamin A. Would vitamin A be what sort of gives it, especially in the summer, that yellow tint? Yeah,
these keratins, also, yeah, it's super dense in fresh cows. That's a cow that just had a baby.
Okay.
Because these calves are scrambling to put together growth.
So that's basically what's happening then, is like that milk all gets created as you just eloquently described it. And then a calf, to survive or to thrive, mm-hmm. is going to be eating that. Now, I guess walk us through how that produces or helps create such prominent growth and recovery on a daily basis for a calf.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about calves. Calves, their DNA commands that they grow. they will grow. They will get bigger, even if they're undernourished.
Okay.
Okay. The difference is if a calf is undernourished, it'll grow at the expense of a strong immune system.
Okay.
It just won't thrive, and it'll be much more likely to maybe grow but be less muscle mass. Maybe grow and have more disease processes going on. Maybe grow and have its immune system not regulated, either overactive or underactive.
Mm-hmm.
It may grow until it dies.
Right.
So you need to have the macronutrients, all the nutrients in order, macro and micronutrients all in order. So, I mean, it's all quite simple. The calf would consume the proteins, for example, and the fats for the energy and for the basically for regulation. The fats also play a role in, and it gets into its bloodstream, and there you have all the building blocks. And DNA says to the calf, you got to expand this bone. You got to make this muscle dense. You got to make these immune antibodies. And now it has the currency to build.
To do that, yeah.
Right.
So I guess that would be a question I have then is like, when you're drawing this picture, when you're painting this picture, I'm seeing, okay, this cow that might weigh 1,200 pounds needs to grow. And genetically, it's been taught that the best way for it to grow is to consume this product, the milk, right? The raw milk that's coming out. Of course, I jump to it. I go, all right, well, if we're doing lifting or resistance-based training, this likely will also, if it works for a 1,200-pound cow, it probably is going to work for human beings. I make that jump. I want to know how you handle. Let's say I make that jump and I get into a debate with somebody as a human.
Go ahead.
Why should human beings consume dairy? And this is a classic argument. No other mammals are harboring or using dairy products. Why should I? Why should us? Why should we be doing this if no other mammals out there are doing that?
Well, we can. It's a high protein, high fat, high energy, high nutrient food to eat. It's the perfect food. Why should we? Well, we can. We could eat grass and it wouldn't work.
Right.
We could eat tree leaves that are falling around us and we wouldn't get the nutrients out of it. I mean, this is a pretty good deal for us. It's the perfect food. Look at what it does for calves. It makes them thrive and grow and get strong, and they're go from these 100-pound helpless little things to being these monsters.
So we've sort of talked about this earlier. When we walked around the farm, and I think one of the interesting parts is, when people bring that argument to me, I'm always like, well, we're also the only mammals that drive cars and live in a house.
Yeah.
So like this is sort of like a weird argument. But the other factor that you brought up is the health of the soil. The bacteria in the soil can actually lead to a healthier gut, and if in human beings, and if that can lead to if the healthy soil, the fungi and the bacteria in the soil leads to a better milk product, then that milk product then can help that animal, help the cow grow, and that can also help us grow as well. So there's sort of like an environmental factor here that's very progressive, I think. I mean, it's not progressive in the sense that it's this, as you said, everything works together. Dude.
Sure. Milk gives back to the soil. Dairy cows, dairy farms produce a lot of cow manure, right. No doubt about it. And that's sometimes used as a bludgeon, like, the manure is getting into the Chesapeake Bay. Okay, maybe that is a problem. So we have storage units, and then we spread it on the soil at the right time, and the manure goes into the soil, and it replenishes. It's good. You need to have that. Otherwise, you're just taking out of the soil, because what comes out of the soil has to somehow get back into the soil. Mm-hmm. Got to replenish it. And dairy gets a bad rap, and that's not fair. It's not correct. Milk is a good food for people, and milk is actually good for the soil. When your cows walk out there and graze, they're fertilizing the ground, the same ground that they took the nutrients back out of. It's a good plan. We're also not shipping feed ingredients halfway across the country. They're walking on out there. That's the trucking.
Right. Yeah, as they're walking out there.
Yeah.
I guess something I wanted to touch on too is like, I like to think about, okay, so if I buy a gallon of your milk, right? We use that gallon. We drink the milk. We do whatever we'll have. We also have your yogurt. Sometimes kefir. Sometimes we'll make our own kefir. Sometimes we get yours. Usually I will admit we usually will make our own kefir, but we use your yogurt every week. If I take your yogurt, that little liquid, the yellow liquid, I would say that would be whey, and we'll also use that to soak oats overnight. So we soak our oats overnight, and I've always felt like the oats end up, to me, being more flavorful and probably nutritious in the morning. So I guess my main question, or maybe it's even just a statement, is like the diversity of how we use the milk products and how we use the yogurt is so prolific that I think it does lead even further to helping you digest other foods as well. And I don't know if you could touch on that or.
Yeah, well, that's what happens with fermentation. That's one of the cool things. It doesn't just save the food; it brings a new nutritional element to it. You're right. I mean, it's interesting. You soak the oats in the whey.
Yeah, so we actually take out our oatmeal or oats. We get an echo hell. And then we'll lay it out, and then we'll in a bowl, and then we'll put about 3 tablespoons of whey over top of it so it soaks overnight. And then we do put in a little bit of water, but then in the morning it has just a hint of like a sour smell, just a little bit of a sour smell. And then that's what we use when we will heat it. I don't know if it gets to to pasteurization, but it'll get probably around 130 degrees.
Yeah.
That is one thing I also wanted to ask you is, what happens to proteins, to calcium, to fats, even to a point when, so your milk is not pasteurized and you can consume this as long as it has under, I think, 10 CFUs, which we could touch on a little bit. But what happens if that milk that you would sell, let's say you do pasteurize it and you sell it as pasteurized milk, what occurs? What does that go through? What do those minerals and vitamins and can those proteins even get negatively impacted by pasteurization, or is that just me making that up because I don't like pasteurized milk?
So when you're pasteurizing, you're adding a lot of energy into the system. Think of it as a system, and you're putting energy into it. So when you're adding energy, you to a system like this, the molecular structures can change because the molecules have a higher net kinetic energy. That's what heat is. You're making the molecules move around. So the more energy you're putting in, the more heat you're putting in, the more the molecules are moving about, and you can even denature some of these proteins that won't go back to their natural conformation. So that's what happens with. That's my staff leaving. That's what the casein proteins, they'll still make cheese after pasteurization. The whey proteins, they get denatured, so those biologically active whey proteins don't survive pasteurization to be biologically active. They still have the nutritional value in terms of digesting and reabsorbing their amino acids after breaking down, so they have that value, but it's not this biologically active whey protein, so you're losing something out of that when you pasteurize. When you pasteurize at ultra high temperatures, like the high temperature pasteurization,
so it'd be like 160, 100, maybe 185 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, the ultra pasteurizing, I think they raised it to it's like 200. It's pretty crazy. Yeah.
And pasteurization is typically known as around 160 is like the starting point.
Yeah, well, there's kind of 3 levels of pasteurization. There's bulk, there's vat pasteurization, which is what I do for the yogurt. That's 145 degrees for 30 minutes. And then you have, and if I get any of these numbers wrong, I'll have to apologize. Then you have then you have it at 180 for 15 seconds, I think.
Okay.
And then you can have it. Oh, I'm going to screw it. It's 165 for 15 seconds. You have higher levels in shorter time. And the hotter it is, the less time you have to have, is the point I'm trying to make.
Right.
The pasteurized milk ordinance has all of this in exquisitely boring detail.
I guess that's a quick question, too, is what is it like? You're regulated by the state. And I know my brother will talk about this quite a bit as well with his farm, but he how does that feel with someone who's not in the nitty gritty, dealing with the product that you want to bring out? How does that feel when they come in and try and tell you you're doing something poorly? You have a barn swallow flying around. That can't be in the milking parlor.
Who are you talking about? The consumers, the inspectors?
The inspectors.
I have a pretty good relationship with my inspector.
Okay.
I've got 1, 2, 3 different inspectors. I got the FDA inspector that comes in here every 6 months. They're the feds, you know. They're the harsh ones,
Yeah.
you know. But they're reasonable. You know, they just want it clean, really.
Okay.
They want it clean. They want your paperwork right.
So really, they're not as annoying as I painted that picture out to be. It's more like, look, just keep your shit together.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty much.
Okay, that's fair. That's very fair. Okay, so Mark, one of the things I did want to do, this is more so Jason's idea, but I think this is going to be fun.
Okay.
Is that the FDA has a video on the dangers of unpasteurized milk.
Yes, sir.
And and I'm sure these dangers exist to a point in if you're buying it from one of the 7,000 dairy head farms that you used to work on, potentially. But we're gonna watch this, and I want to see your response here. I want to watch it and go through what your thoughts are.
Okay.
A cold glass of milk goes great
Do you like
with a
the
lot
music?
of foods.
Yeah, it's great.
Milk and milk products have a lot of vitamins and calcium, but it's important to buy only those products made with pasteurized milk.
Oh, I was going to say that.
Why pasteurized? Because unpasteurized or raw milk from cows, sheep, goats,
They're
or
Holsteins.
other animals can carry bacteria that can make you sick, like salmonella,
Yep.
E. coli,
Yep.
campylobacter, and listeria.
That's right.
Pasteurization heats milk to a high temperature for a short period of time, which kills disease-causing bacteria.
It would.
These harmful bacteria usually don't change the look, taste, or smell of milk, and you can only be sure that they're not in your milk if it's been pasteurized. Some people believe that drinking raw milk
let's pause
is more
there.
nutritious.
What is your first gut response? Or I mean, in all reality, she's not saying anything that's wrong.
No,
there.
she's not saying anything wrong. Anything that's contaminated with these bad bugs is going to be contaminated food. So you have, so it's not just milk that could be contaminated. It's your peanut butter. It's your cantaloupes. We know from that listeria outbreak.
Tomatoes.
Anything can be contaminated with something filthy. And if you eat it, then you're eating contaminated food.
It's like when people take a shit out in the garden, and then they pick their tomatoes, and then they put them and they get sent to grocery stores. This actually has happened, and we've had outbreaks of E. coli from that.
Yeah, quick story. I was at
Does
the
this
Reading
involve
terminal.
you shitting in the
No. I was at the Reading terminal market, and I saw these guys carrying a pallet full of Brussels sprouts, and they lost control of the pallet, and all these stacks of trays of Brussels sprouts. The Brussels sprouts went all rolling into the filth, the unspeakable filth of the brown water in the back of the trucking area, and the two guys looked at each other. Oh, we're gonna get fired! So they quick scrape up all the Brussels sprouts, put them back in the trays, and they took them out there and they sold them.
Yeah.
And so, okay, all right. So what happened with those Brussels sprouts? Well, you could say, well, the people took them home and they washed them off and they cooked them. That's what happened. So therefore, it was safe. Yeah. All right. The Brussels sprouts also, people were touching them with their hands, and they touched everything else. So it's possible for anything to be contaminated. You don't know where that Brussels sprout has been,
That's
my
true,
friend.
And I think, as we're making a mockery of this video, I do think it's fair that there's regulations.
Yes.
There's reasons for things to be controlled, and for people to create products at as high of a quality product as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more the fear mongering is more so the issue than actual education and comprehension of what a food system really could and should become.
Sure, food safety is real. Food safety is important. Food safety is important on this farm. Food safety should be important everywhere in the food production chain, from the opening line all the way to the table. Food safety is important. Maintaining the cold chain, keeping it all clean, being clean prep, all of that. It's all very important. So in a raw milk farm, doing testing, Yeah, we do a lot of testing. I want to know what my test results are. I like to brag about my test results, how clean the milk is. Less than 1 coliform per mil, like basically undetectable levels of coliforms. That means we're doing a good job. And so I like to know that. We test for all these things, Listeria, Campylobacter. Comes back clear every time. We've never had a problem with that because we milk the cows clean. So if you want to have raw milk, I would say, yeah, it is important to go ahead, ask your raw milk producer, what's your coliform count? And if he doesn't know, don't buy the milk.
Right, yeah.
I can tell you what my coliform count is. You can say, Mark, what was your highest coliform count you ever had? Have you ever had a coliform problem? What are you doing?
Have you ever had over 2?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
And
and that's 10's the limit.
Yeah, 10's the limit.
For pasteurized and unpasteurized.
Yeah. So when I start to see okay, there's I get 1 coliform. Okay, that means that I like to keep it at 0. Forget about the upper limit of 10. I like it at 0. So if there's 1, I go back and I say, oh, it's probably a problem with a cleaning issue.
Okay.
With the pipeline.
Right.
So
it's almost even to that point. It's probably less in your case, it's easier to pinpoint a problem because the animals are being treated well, the animals are raised humanely, they're outside, they're cows being cows.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easier then to break down, okay, this bacteria, this could exist. You laid out with Listeria with us earlier where it's very easy to find where Listeria would be. It's likely going to be in a drain. It's likely going to be in specific spots. So then if that comes back and you see it, you can identify where that's going to be a lot easier than if your whole farm was just a total shit show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you want a well-managed farm. If you go to the farm and you see, like you said, you just, what was that, shit show?
Shit show.
If you see that, yeah.
I think that's in the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture handbook. It says, farm thou not be a shit show.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to have a well-managed farm.
So I did want to ask this quick before we sort of sign off is why is it that to me there's a pretty, and I don't know for sure because I'm not in it like you are. I was at a time in the raw milk scene. I'm not in the raw milk scene, but I just feel like there's a good supportive scene in Pennsylvania. What is that? I used to, my wife's parents would almost threaten me that I was trafficking your milk when I would go to New Jersey to see them, and I would even visit friends there and sell them some of your milk, transport your milk essentially. Mm-hmm. But what is it that makes Pennsylvania or other states why is it legal here and not in other states? Yeah,
I don't know. I think it's respect for the tradition.
Okay.
Pennsylvania is a really important dairy state, and there's a lot of really hardworking, dedicated farmers here that do a really excellent job. Pennsylvania milk is a great feature of what the state can do. It's not just these. I was working out in Texas and New Mexico and Kansas, and those guys sure make a lot of milk. But Pennsylvania has got a long dairy tradition with lots of expertise that goes back multiple generations. We got really good dairy farms here in Pennsylvania.
And so that just has that tradition sort of has played an impact on where the culture's developed here now.
Yep.
So basically, my takeaway is that 1, raw milk is safe if you know the farmer and if the farmer understands and knows their CFUs, their coliform per unit. Is that what it?
Colony forming units.
Colony forming units and what that test is going to be. Make sure the farm is clean. Make sure the cows are raised out on pasture, and that's going to have a massive impact. 1, environmentally, but 2, even more so on the actual product of the milk, and that's going to help. If you're into resistance-based training, if you're watching this podcast, you likely are into resistance-based training. That's going to help the protein, the casein, the whey protein is going to help with that overall recovery. And along with that, the minerals, the vitamins and minerals like phosphorus, calcium, vitamin A, vitamin D, magnesium, all of those things are going to have a massive impact on your immune system, your muscles, and in turn, even bones and anything along those lines. I actually wanted to ask you this quick before we do leave. is now there's research in humans on myokines, and myokines are essentially these means of a communication that our muscles are communicating with our body, like, hey, this myokine is noticing this is going on in a specific muscle. That's going to lead to a positive impact on immune systems. And I didn't know if that's been brought up or discussed at all in the dairy industry or not.
No, this is new to me.
And essentially, it's just like, there's a point of where having a large amount of muscle, not that you want to be absurdly hypertrophic, but having more muscle later in age will help you with longevity, and it's going to help you with life. And then to me, it all goes back to, if I want to have more lean muscle mass, I need to be making sure that I'm eating well, and I'm eating from a high quality source like your farm here at Wholesome Dairy Farms.
It's high quality protein, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? Are we going to pose with our shirts off now?
Maybe you can. It can take it back to your days of rocking out in Philadelphia and having your mosh pits or whatever you did back in the day.
On a good day.
So, Mark, thanks for being on the podcast. And everybody out there, you can check him out at Wholesome Dairy Farms. What's your Instagram handle?
Grass-fed is health food.
That's right. Grass-fed is health food. Until next time, guys, peace.
Overrated, underrated. Trap bar. Deadlift.
Overrated.
You're not going to see the deadlift as the absolute strength movement.
Yeah, I agree. Unless you're a power lifter.
Overrated, underrated. Jefferson curl.
Overrated. Everybody's like doing that all the time now. Then just picking up a bar that's not moving is a deadlift, but then also picking up dumbbells that aren't moving is technically a dumbbell deadlift.